Good evening, and I'd like to call our virtual executive session July 16th, 2020 to order. And now we're going to recess. The meeting is recessed for an executive session to discuss the qualifications of an applicant for public employment and to discuss with legal counsel representing the district litigation or potential litigation to which the district is likely to become a party.
Hello.
Hi.
Is this the right meeting?
I hope so.
Okay.
Oh, found it. There we go.
I lost President Hamada.
Yeah, it's writing. Oh, let me unmute. Oh, I am unmuted. Okay. I was looking at this. It's like I was coughing earlier. There she is. You're on mute, Leslie.
Okay. All right. We are now leaving the executive session and adjourning at 6:02. And we're going to go back into the exempt session. And that's going to go until 6:30.
6:30 or 7?
Oh, 7.
It's 7.
7, excuse me.
Yeah, okay. Okay,
Do we have to leave this now too?
yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Karen, am I stuck in here?
I think you should have all stayed there and I had to move you back.
Okay, that's what I thought. Okay.
So
As we leave the meeting, if we,
yeah, if
That's
you
what I thought.
leave, you leave the meeting. So,
Okay.
okay, let's. Okay,
he's got to move us.
okay, Denise, you are still stuck somewhere. So I think you need to leave and re-enter and I'll move you over.
Okay.
Thank you. Roxy, you can't go anywhere. Roxy, you need to go lay down. Okay. You guys want to go downstairs for a little while? Huh? You want to go downstairs? We'll go downstairs for a little while. Let's go. Let's go. Okay, Jim, Macy, you want to go downstairs? You walk down the stairs or are you confused? All right, so you come with me.
Hey, Karen, can you hear me? Karen, can you hear me? Karen, can you hear me?
Macy, want to come down?
Put it away down. Okay.
everyone here? All right. Good evening. It is 7:01 p.m. and I am calling the special meeting to order. I'd like to welcome you. This is a special meeting of the Kent School District Board, which is held in public to comply with the Open Public Meeting Act. Tonight, the board will be approving contracts and a consent agenda. And now we are on to 2.0. And well, actually, we're on 2.01. And first up on the discussion and approval is the Sierra School at Kent School District. I would like to ask a board member to present a motion. I can't hear you.
You're
You're
muted.
on mute still. There we
I
go.
make a motion. Make a motion that we approve 2.01 Sierra School at Kent School District.
Is there a second?
A second.
There is a motion on the floor to approve the Sierra School at the Kent School District. We have a second discussion.
I had a lot of questions about this. I mean, essentially, this is a charter school in a public school. And I appreciate most of my questions were answered. I did send a couple follow-up questions yesterday that I didn't get answers for. Some of my concerns about this is it requires us paying for 24 students, whether we have those students or not. And also the contract requires us to identify students within 5 days. But beyond that, I just, as a board, we have oversight responsibilities, and I just want to clarify this whole process. So the questions I have are, when did the district identify the need for these services that this contract would provide?
Good evening, President Hamada, directors, Dr. Watts, and I think if we want to kind of go back into when we originally start looking at the potential of bringing an in-house program to support some of our more intensive needs, I'm going to invite Spencer Pan and Beth Stoughton to kind of share a little bit of Kent's sort of pathway into this work. Some of this information we've presented during the work session, so I think it'll be good to help clarify now that we've had some additional time to process some of what we've heard. So I'll turn it over to Spencer and Beth.
Hi, I'm Spencer, and I wanted to share a little bit around the history of that question. So thank you, Director Bettinger, for that question. It actually predates the last year. If you really go back and look at the history of asking about this question of how we can expand upon some of the service provision and meet the needs of students with therapeutic behavioral service needs, it's probably about 4 years ago that this question, at least in the records that I've been able to identify, emerged. That urgency has obviously increased over time, as we've previously shared, with some of the adjustments in how we provide our continuum of services for inclusive education in Kent. So in the last about 2 years, we've taken a look at, what are some of the different options and possibilities of bridging the kind of out-of-district service placements that we do have students serve through, and then our kind of in-district options that we provide behavioral services for. And as with any district of our size, there's a complexity in student needs. And this is, again, a it is a small number numerically of students who would require these services in the context of the size of our district and the student population we serve, but they are important services for us to have and have offerings for.
So when or did the district create an RFP for these services?
No, at least in my knowledge, there was not an RFP or RFQ process created for this.
Okay.
We did complete kind of an informal bid process to look at what vendors might have these options, provide these types of services. And so we really did look at three different prospective vendors. We looked at them on the front end of, do they offer, kind of that overarching behavior therapeutic level service? And then we asked a few questions. I'm happy to share that with you later. But the general questions are, do they have experience in Washington State, right? It's important to have it's helpful when there's an awareness and knowledge around the local requirements, et cetera. Do they provide a flexibility? And that's a big one. What we found is with a number of different organizations, when they're coming and working in a school district, there can be challenges of being a little bit more modular in what they can provide. You want both that strict ability to provide a package that can be more turnkey, but you're also looking for the flexibility to meet the needs of our labor partners and groups, as well as the student needs. And so we wanted to look at a couple different items within that. One was, do they have staffing flexibility? Can they work with KSD staff within that model if we need them to, but can they also provide their own staffing if we're not able to provide those certificated or classified staff into those positions? Do they have some track record of being able to have a turnkey model? We don't want to engage in a contract and then pay for something that takes a period of time to get up and running, right? So we want to be sure that if we're going to invest district and public resources in this, that we can do so and be able to serve students out the gate pretty quickly. So those are some of the different things we looked at, but we did not engage in a RFP or RFQ.
Okay. And as I understand it, correct me if I'm wrong, but SESI is not in Washington State anywhere. They just, earlier you said, that was one of the requirements. This is a hard conversation, but I'm just really concerned about sole source purchasing, and without a written identified need, it concerns me on many levels. And, I don't think the board would be performing its oversight duties without asking some of these questions, especially past, is this vendor in any way involved with ERDI or any other professional associations for which the board or superintendent is affiliated or has received any, potential compensation or travel or honorariums? These are all concerns I have. And to hear that there was no RFP or written identified plan, that concerns me.
And I heard a few different questions in there, and I appreciate the the oversight responsibilities within that. I know I can't answer all the questions in terms of the larger scope of affiliation, but I can speak to the ERDI question. I asked that directly of the vendor, in this case SESI, and they've participated in their conferences before, but they're not affiliated with them in any way. And so we did do some due diligence around that. In terms of just a compete process, I can just share what occurred and also what types of services we're looking for. I think the other important piece that I like to share with this is it's a very discrete service that we're looking for here. There aren't a lot of vendors that either operate here in Washington State or have the capability or desire to provide the services in Washington State. So of the three vendors that we took a look at, one of them does operate in the state, and two of them do not, but have interest in operating within Washington State. And so
who are the other vendors?
So one is a parent company of a different contractor that we utilize. So we have a contract with Autism Spectrum Therapies, and they have a different branch of their corporate structure that offers kind of therapeutic services like this. The other was Seneca Family of Agencies, and Seneca has a presence kind of locally here, but they operate similarly as a larger scale network in the country. And so we looked at these different criteria, and in this case, as we reviewed them, none of these vendors will fulfilled every single criteria that we're looking for. Like optimally, you want a local provider. Optimally, you want one that's flexible. But CESI was of these three vendors, CESI was the one that had the most items, with the exception of being local to Washington State. They fulfilled the other criteria that we were looking for at that time.
And looking ahead at this year that we're in with a pandemic, another concern I have is why now, when there's a potential we won't even be going into school full time for at least a couple months.
And I think one is we have as a district, we're obligated to plan, right, for many different contingencies, and we don't know what that future right now may hold. We don't. I know we have an ETA to have a plan brought to the board and a decision around that for what the return to school might look like. But as a district employee, it's my obligation to make sure that we have planning for serving all of our student needs. And in kind of that mid-long range planning, we know that this is an area of need that hasn't been met in the ideal way that we would like to, as a district, build kind of that larger capacity and plan. So the timing, we always have there's always something new and something different that emerges, but part of our charge is to look at not just the immediacy, but the longer range planning for this.
Right. And so they would be hiring their own certificated teachers. So how does this impact in our district with our labor partners?
So we anticipated that question, and we would never have moved forward and bring this to the board without having some robust conversations with the impacted labor groups before that. So we did have conversations with both our paraeducator union partners, as well as our KEA cert teacher partners. And understanding that there are staff that would be brought in, there are also that conversation was clear and upfront, and we have understanding with our labor groups as to what this program scope would look like, and what the prospective future of it is. I think the long range plan, and we've been upfront with this prospective vendor, is to utilize our own staff, and that's the plan for us, as well as our own staff in the district. But to get there, we want to see what this ideal implementation would look like, and so there's agreement amongst our groups that let's see what this looks like, and that's how the contract is written, right? It allows for flexibility. If we wouldn't invest in this if we didn't think it was going to work, but if it doesn't demonstrate effectiveness, then there's a capacity for us to change and pivot direction.
That's all my questions.
So, Mr. Pan, good to see you again. I think about a year ago, we had dinner together at a fundraiser, and we had a good chat. Anyway, I'm curious, in other school districts, have they met this need that we have particular need for right now, and have articulated that we do have this need and not fulfilling it? Do they have the capability to do that in-house? Are they taking this without contracting out to do that?
I can speak to what I know, right? Every district has a unique circumstance that they're faced with in terms of, by district size, right? We're a larger district, and so the breadth of our needs are just by probability are going to increase that, in terms of what service needs we have for students. And so we have some unique challenges when we are a larger district in terms of the breadth of services we have to provide. That said, yes, there's different ways that different districts have gone. Some have brought in-house, just operating these services, and so building that out. And that's really our vision as well. But we also, while we're trying to do that, we also need to make sure we serve our students and provide them the services they're obligated under, federal and state law. So other districts have brought in a similar type of model, maybe not with the same vendor. And so just like there's a continuum within our services, there's a continuum of how different districts have approached serving these needs. So you have, what we're presently doing, which is probably on a more common extreme for many of our surrounding district partners, which is, you either serve these students outside of the district with MPA sites that can provide those services, or you bring those services into the district. Kind of in the middle of that is to use external partners and their systems and our resources, and kind of do a hybridization of that, but keep the students closer to their neighborhood, right? Keep them in Kent, keep them within this community. And then you have I would say kind of the last piece of it, which is if you move that continuum further, you operate those services, those programs with KSD staff in our buildings at as close as you can within their neighborhood schools. And so that's kind of the breadth of different things that districts around us have done. We're looking at, can we go from this extreme of, that is not uncommon, right? This extreme of relying upon MPA partners and external entities, to maybe something a little bit closer where we're building and having opportunities to grow our own programming in-house.
I think the hope is that, and the intention is that, just like Spencer said, we grow that capacity of our own staff, so it becomes sort of a model classroom that then can transition over to KSD staff, because finding out of district NPA placements for these very young children, K through 2, with extreme dangerous behaviors is challenging. There are very few out of district placements that will accept those students.
So am I correct in understanding this is a type of a charter school in a public school?
I'm not exactly sure where that's stemming from. They are a for-profit organization, and what we're doing is similar to how we have agency staff that work within our schools right now for hard to fill positions. They are providing that service in addition to the program model and supports to allow us to kind of bring in-house those same services. It really is a grow our own approach here in Kent. And really specifically around our inclusive education services, and really adding another layer to our service continuum for students.
When I was researching CESI, they are, in many states, they run standalone charter schools for students in addition to classroom models like this. So that's where that's coming from. And again, one thing I'll be honest too, it makes me really uncomfortable that we're talking about this in a special session and the public doesn't have the opportunity to comment during special session. So.
And I just have one final question, because this concerns me deeply, to understand that K through 12, boy, those are young little minds. When you say this would allow us to build our own capacity, I'm not sure, are you saying that at present we couldn't do that without this program? We have to have them to model it and then use, I mean, are the teachers that we're going to hire going to be coming in and watching this process and learning from this process? I'm just not quite understanding how this works.
Yeah, so did you want to speak to that, Spencer? Or?
Sure. And
Okay.
if I miss something, please please chime in for me. So a little bit of both of those things, right? So on one end, we do provide, we're obligated to provide these services to our students, regardless of whether there is this particular agency entity or not. So what we're looking at is, how we would provide those in a way that is robust and also grows capacity, right? There's right now you can read the briefing paper, and I know that's publicly posted. How we're providing these services right now is to either outsource the services to an external party, right? When we send students out of district, or we're bringing in agency partners right now through behavior staff, or providing really intensive like one-on-one services through paraeducators for a lot of these services. So that's the current reality of how we serve and implement these IEPs. What we'd like to build towards is having growing that knowledge internally and growing that capacity internally to have more of a programmatic model to provide those services, rather than kind of generating individual one-off services or outsourcing that service provider. So in the second half of the question, you're asking around what would this look like, and the kind of that model that we have, it absolutely is that. We want to have an opportunity where our staff have transparency and can view what this model implementation looks like, that we can replicate it and grow it. We've been transparent in our conversations with this particular prospective vendor, that is our intent, and also with our labor groups that is our intent. And it's not just for rotating our prospective staff. We're thinking about when we bring on, and we know we have a need at a different school for that would be providing these services. It might provide a different landing zone where we can have a period of time where teacher staff, instructional staff that would be going into a similar classroom environment can prospectively co-teach in that environment, can look at the resources and implementation before we place them and give them, say, here's another classroom at the school and here's your assignment. Because the reality is these are challenging positions, right? It takes a high degree of skill and extensive knowledge and a commitment to be there, be empathetic, to know the knowledge and technical skills, and then do that day in and day out. And we want to make sure that any of our staff are equipped with the skill set needed, as well as support that they require to execute that.
That all sounds very good. The one thing I'm concerned about is we don't even know if we're going to be in a classroom to be, trying to do this on a home model. If I don't know how that would quite work if we, can't be in a building. That's kind of a question.
And I've actually asked some of those questions, right? Of like, well, what would it look like if we were to move into either a hybridized or virtualized model, or implementation? What would this? And it's a question that this particular vendor has been asked, obviously, because they serve a breadth of schools, and so they've shared that they will model and ensure that the provision of services aligned to whatever model the district adopts and decides. So if we're in whichever type of implementation, it really would track with that type similar implementation. There would be challenges, as with anything, depending on how that would be implemented, but there's a necessity to provide those services for our students, regardless of how we would do that, right? Whether it's physically in person or otherwise.
Spencer, what would it how would it affect this particular process if we were to postpone it towards, a period where we have some sort of certainty whether we're going to open schools or what the situation would look like. How does that hurt us to wait?
I mean, we know that it's a challenging question to answer. So, you know, I can answer to what I think, but I don't have any great certainty around that. So I would say we know exactly how we're presently providing those services and through which means. So we have that as a baseline. We know what we aspire to do. And so it's a continuum again, right? It's not a 0 to 100. The impact would be that one, we don't know, there's a period of time to set up or move forward with this. And we know that just for kind of the logistical pieces of it, it's not that we decide on a contract and then we can immediately implement, right? We would still, if we went forward with this, the agency would still have to hire staff, and the vendor we would still need to get the physical location up and running. So I think there's a necessary level of lead time before we're able to implement. The second is, like with all things of this nature, there is a kind of two-way process, right? So I think we can see what the existing prospective contract would look like and the agreements that we have in place with that. There would be different conversations depending on how much a delay would be with our labor groups, with our physical building locations. Do we hire staff then into, and what's the implication for serving these students? Do we continue providing those services in the way that we have up to this point, or do we try to provide them in what we think might be more ideal absent this service? So there's a lot of contingencies depending on where we go with that. I don't know if that answers the question.
Yes, it does. So yes, the configuration of staffing, I can see. That's
I think
a discussion.
one of the other things to share is, as we're looking at reopening and servicing those students who are furthest from educational justice, and looking at our inclusive education students and what that looks like for them going forward, that is something that that our reopening task force is going to have to look at and think about. And this would be one of those groups where these are some of the families who we don't hear from when we are in online only necessarily, right? These are those children who we fear losing track of. And so brings to mind even more the importance of, if we are going into a hybrid model, bringing something like this in to ensure that they do have those touch points and they're getting those services to the best that we can deliver.
And I think it's important to keep in mind that we're talking about a program model that is a significant shift from the way our program is currently structured. This would be a new program that allows for more intensive, direct educational supports for the students who have the greatest need and have been identified to be a part of this program. So the one thing, and we see this in our labor partner contracts as well, is that there's typically a window of time before you would want to switch a student from one classroom setting and experience to another. And we're really thinking about our primary students, our intermediate students, where it would be in our best interest. Everything that we're talking about is really about putting the needs of the student first. And how do we maximize our capacity to be able to provide a service that doesn't have them start in a program and they don't have the opportunity to exit. And we know that early intervention is important. And right now that our program model is kind of woven into a bigger classroom program setting that doesn't allow for some of that intensive small group instruction to happen on a consistent basis, so that students develop those skills. And the idea is that they'll be able to transition out of the program over time because they've kind of developed and internalized some of that self-regulation that needs to happen to make them more successful and better equipped to transition to a more inclusive environment.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Seeing none, I think it's time to call for a vote. We have before us the Sierra School at Kent School District being brought into, and it was moved and seconded. All those in favor of Sierra School at Kent School District being brought into the district signify by raising your right hand and saying aye.
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 All those opposed to bringing Sierra School into the school district at this present time signify by raising your right hand and saying nay.
Nay.
Okay, so that's 2-2. Help me, Mr.
Motion
Reynolds.
does not carry. We need a majority vote to have it pass.
All right, thank you. We're moving on to 2.02, the City of Kent School Resources Officer Agreement. I will entertain a motion.
I move that we approve the City of Kent School Resource Officer Agreement.
Looking for a second.
I'll second to move the discussion.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It has been moved and seconded that the City of Kent School Resource Officer Agreement be approved. Discussion. I'd like to start off the discussion saying that I have some grave reservations about bringing this up at this particular time without a lot more community input and discussion. Not that it would change the outcome of what we're going to do, but it's a hot topic. We all know that nationally and internationally right now. And I just feel that our community would like to weigh in on it, at least have the chance to weigh in on it. That's my feeling.
That's pretty much my feeling too. We've gotten emails about this, and again, my concern is when we have special sessions and the community doesn't have the opportunity to speak on a topic that is forefront of mind right now. It concerns me.
If I may, President Hamada, members of the board, colleagues, today I'm joined with Randy Heath, Executive Director of Student and Family Support, who supervises our safety services, and wanted just to start by saying I appreciate definitely your concerns that were brought up, Director Bettinger and President Hamada. I wanted to also ground us in the purpose of the contract today really is about approving the current school year contract with the City of Kent with the revisions of two of our SROs that were pulled during the closure. We went back and had to redo the contract in order to take out those services that were not rendered, and that's what's reflective today. So that's the first thing that I wanted to point out. And then, if I may, to speak to the concerns Director Bettinger and President Hamada related to where we are. We have the state of Washington Senate Bill 1216, which was passed just recently, which specifically speaks to, I think, some of those concerns that you're thinking about. Three pieces, and I'm going to let Mr. Heath speak to, but three pieces in this legislation that actually has been in place, being worked on over the last 2 years, and passed finally this last session, that speaks to school districts focusing on and sharing the training that needs to happen in our school districts, not just in Kent School District, the accountability pieces that need to be there, and then finally community involvement, which it speaks to specifically. I'm going to give it to Mr. Heath to speak to you a little bit more about what the bill does say, and we are prepared to move forward in those areas. And so, Mr. Heath.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, actually, I think our legislators had many of the concerns that the public are now voicing around making sure that SROs in the schools were there for a positive reason and not a negative one. And so they took some steps in the legislature to put some things into place around what the job responsibilities really are of a police officer when they are part of a school, and really what they should be doing and what they should not be doing, also in terms of things like school discipline. School discipline is the prerogative of school employees and of school administrators. And so we shouldn't be bringing school resource officers in and dealing with issues that should be dealt with as far as school discipline. They are there, to help build and foster a positive relationship with law enforcement, with our students, help keep the safety of the building. And then really for those emergency situations where, I wish we didn't have them in the schools, but we do have emergency situations in which police officers in the schools have been a great help in diffusing that situation quickly. And so the other big part of this, which is I think was great, and many of our officers have already gone through this training even before this, is really specifying what areas school resource officers need to be trained in order to work in schools. Just for example, some of the topics that need to be trained in is constitutional and civil rights of children in schools, including state law governing search and interrogation of youth in schools. Things like just basic child and adolescent development, trauma-informed approaches, recognizing and responding to youth mental health issues, educational rights of students with disabilities, our special education students, de-escalation techniques. So there's a big long list of things of anybody, any law enforcement officers that we would want working with our students. And so I think this is a positive direction and will be leading to things, and there's also a whole requirement around what data needs to be kept in terms of their interaction with students. So.
Yeah, and I also wanted to add for our board's understanding of even the training the SROs receive now, and I'm back to our Kent over 10-year partnership with our 3 municipalities. They have specific training for SROs. That training not only includes the CPR, AED, and a number of other pieces, but it includes specifically de-escalation tactics. There's diversity training that we do during our academy, which is a 7-day academy run every summer. It also includes restraint and isolation, working with youth. There are a number of pieces that the SROs are required to be trained in prior to even being a part of an SRO. And I wanted to also share that I meet regularly with Chief Padilla and also Chief McCurdy. And I can't tell you how lucky I believe we are in the partnership that we have, not just because of the SROs, but because of many other things that they provide in our district outside of this contract, including King County, by the way. And so the other piece I wanted to share for your information is that we in 17-18 entered a 3-year MOU. When I got here in 16, the cadence by which the contracts were being moved forward through the city councils and our board were just off, and we continue to work toward that. I did send some of that information earlier, but to that point about the 3-year piece is we're still working toward that. We want to get in that process. And so we are at the end of those 3 years. And so we will be coming back to you, the board, the end of August. I believe we have a a meeting scheduled on the 26th, if I'm not mistaken, set aside, but where we will be aligned with the timing and, like I said, the cadence of getting contracts in front of the city council and in front of our boards for approval so that we're in sync.
So to clarify, we're not approving tonight, correct?
We are approving the changes to the current 1920 contract, which, by the way, saves us money because services were not rendered. We're not approving anything moving towards 2021 because now we enter the 3-year MOU process because we're at the end of the 3rd year this year.
But that document, the document that was attached is the 1819 contract, correct? So the 1920 agreement, the city of Kent hasn't returned it to us yet.
They have, however, we have not done, no, they never did turn it into us, correct. And what we're trying to do is in this one, you would be approving the revision, which reduces the amount that we will be paying for the 2 SROs that the contract's specifically for. So we're saving, as you see in our brief, I believe upwards of around $40,000.
Boy, thank you for that clarification. I just not sure our public understands that.
Right. And again, the problem with special meetings in the summer, they don't get the opportunity to speak.
Right, but I mean, this is just actually going back on services received and us getting a credit for it. But
correct.
When you see it on an agenda, you know what's going on. And that's why I went, oh my gosh, you're not really going to do this, are you? And Dr.
Absolutely.
Watts and I talked about it, and
Yeah.
now that you've explained that, yeah, okay, it's going to be an educational piece, okay?
Yes. And I want to reiterate too, as Mr. Heath mentioned, the Senate Bill 1216, every district is going to need to do that, regardless of where they are in their current contracts or MOUs with SROs. And so, and as you know, we are in our back to schools task force is currently looking at what will that look like for just our learning. We will also have to adjust to that. So it's actually good timing that we just ended the 3-year of the MOU so that we can include in the future the pieces of the Senate Bill 1216, as well as what will service look like or not. Because as you know, the contract currently does say that the SROs can be pulled at any time for emergency purposes, which they were. And that's the reason the city of Kent did that. And again, Chief Padilla worked closely with me prior to all of that happening.
I think one of the things that we really need to do is examine our current policies that we have surrounding violence prevention, harassment, intimidation, bullying. Director Bettinger and I also worked on, I don't remember the number, 4314,
right.
I think. Yeah.
Yeah.
That is just so confounding, and we had to send it back to our attorney. Because of all of the changes in laws, we really need to be more educated in this before we make a decision to renew. The other thing I wanted to mention is that this is going back to history, but in 2004, when we had an independent panel, I know you remember this.
Yes, I do.
Israel. We did a report on recommendations, and I did a minority report on that. And one of the things that stood out for me at that time was that we only had a safety officer, a safety supervisor who was armed in this district. There was only one individual armed in this district. Now we're hearing, I believe all of them are armed, correct? The officers who are coming from Kent, not our safety. I want to be clear, not our
services officers,
safety
correct,
services,
correct.
but our SROs. Our
Yes.
SROs are armed.
That is correct.
So back then there was only one SRO that was armed, and that was in the case of an extreme situation. And even that, the public went, they were very upset about that whole, just the image of that in a school building. So I guess I need to kind of understand the context by which how that changed, and sort of look at what prompted that change, and then also what are the current laws that would dictate, we have armed officers in our school buildings. So I know you mentioned Senate Bill 1216 or 2016 rather.
1216.
1216, sorry. So I think, I don't know, for me personally, I need to study it, but in this particular case, you're only looking for approval of a reduction in
That's correct.
service. So I'm okay with this, but coming forward, I'm hoping you'll be prepared with
Absolutely.
all those information.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
that we can make the right decision. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
And piggybacking off what Director Vendagosalam was saying is, if officers are going into elementary schools and they're trying to, get to know their community, why do they need to be armed? Why can't they be wearing plain clothes? Because, to a little kid, that would be really intimidating, especially children of color who already are disproportionately targeted for discipline and for crimes. That doesn't really seem like that would be really conducive for an open dialogue for all the children. And, and if it's an elementary school, why would they need to, be armed? That seems counterproductive to me, honestly.
Yeah, I think the piece that I will share, these are commissioned officers. And I will say that even though we have the two officers from the city of Kent and a liaison, we have one officer from the Covington and also King County Sheriff, to be clear. We work with all of those municipalities, and we always use 911. That's our first, we don't wait for our officers to be there. And I say that in that they're also a part of that. They're commissioned officers that are armed because they could be going anywhere. And so we have a clear distinction between, as Mr. Heath mentioned earlier, what their role is as an SRO and what their role is as a Kent PD officer, in this case, if they're called upon for a different emergency. And so that is the purpose, I believe, of Senate Bill 1216, to come back and really demystify some of those pieces and make sure that our public understands. And that's why you have the community involvement piece as part of the theme for that Senate bill. And so when we come back to you, that's what we intend to do. Tim Kovich wasn't able to be here. He's on vacation and wanted to be here. And he definitely is interested in sharing more about how we could do that. Director Vendagosalam, about how we can share with our community. So what's the purpose of being armed? What are some of the other pieces that we can do with our community to make sure that not only they, but our students first and foremost feel safe? Because as we know, that's one thing that we did hear from our community during our levy is safety is number one, foremost on their minds. So we continue to work at that.
So I do want to say, with regards to Tim, he has stated multiple times to me anyway, directly, that he has followed those recommendations from 2004, which really calls out for a positive relationship with our students. And so I really want to make that distinction that we're talking about school resource officers versus our safety schools.
Yes, thank you.
Safety services, and the amount of work that they do in our schools is so greatly appreciated. And so I just want to make sure that there's a distinction drawn from with the public about that.
Yeah, and our students are very clear about that. We just concluded our graduation ceremonies at each school, and our students see them as part of a staff. They are wonderful at what they do. They helped out in many different ways. And I say that in that that is the relationship piece that we're talking about. And so look forward to coming back to you in August, but I want to be clear about the purpose of tonight.
And then I also just wanted to mention, if you're doing some more research on this, WASDA has come up with a model policy around school resource officers. It's their number is 4311. We already have a 4311, so it would, you know, take either choosing a different number or, you know, changing the one that is currently 4311. So
thank you.
That could be the one that Director Vengadosalam and I looked at.
Yeah, that was 4314, but yeah, I'll
yeah.
take a look and see.
We'll look at it.
And I would be totally remiss if I did not speak to Andy McCurdy, our sheriff in Covington, and Chief Padilla, Ralph Padilla. I've worked closely with both of them. I've seen the leadership at the top that really can make a difference in how they treat people. And we've worked with in our boxing club, we had 2 police officers that came in, and I could go on and I won't, some incidents that were helped because of their community policing and knowing our kids and just coming in and working out with them and just being a buddy to them and all that, all those things are very beneficial. I just think at this particular time, we need to really communicate to our community. And tonight, this really is not the place, now that I understand what we're going to vote on for tonight. But in the future, definitely we want to have I'd like to see a town hall on this, but I don't know if we can do it virtually, but yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are we ready? Are we ready for all our discussion? Any more discussion? Okay, are we ready for a vote on this then? It has been moved and seconded to approve with the City of Kent the School Resources Officer Agreement, where it's beneficial to us to have, well, I don't need to go on. All those in favor signify by raising your right hand and saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed signify by raising your right hand and saying nay. The motion carries. Okay, so we're on to the consent agenda. Is there anyone on the board that would like to pull anything from the consent agenda for discussion?
I'd like to pull 3.03.
Any others?
I don't want to pull, but I'd like to comment on 3.03.
Well, we can probably do that in the discussion, right?
Mhm.
So the remainder, 3.1, 3.4, 3.5, we can vote on, or do they just stand? Can we vote? Can I entertain a motion for those to be
I
accepted?
move that we approve the consent agenda minus item 3.03 roadmap region early learning math grant.
I'll second.
It has been, discussion. Seeing none. All those in favor of passing the consent agenda 3.1, 3.2, 3.4, and 3.5 signify by raising your right hand and saying aye.
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 Those opposed signify by raising your right hand and saying nay. The motion carries. Okay. Do we need a motion on 3.3 before we have discussion?
I move that we approve 3.03 roadmap region early learning math grant.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded to approve 3.03 roadmap region early learning math grant.
So my question is not on the program itself, and I appreciate all the answers that were sent to my question and the follow-up on how you're assessing this. And I believe it's important work. My question is merely about potential conflicts of interest, because, you know, when we're talking about money to Kent Youth and Family Services and other organizations, you know, we have staff that are on the board there. So I don't understand quite fully, and I need more education on how that works. And also, quite honestly, recently we've gotten letters that potentially concern me as far as potential conflicts of interest. And, this grant in 2019 or in 2018 was about a little under 6,000. Then it went up to 26K. Now it's a little over 177K. And again, I am not disputing the work. The work looks important. I just want to, for my own clarification, understand conflicts of interest and how that would play in this instance.
Thank you, Director Bettinger. I appreciate it. We want to obviously inform and certainly enlighten and I would say potentially demystify or debunk any conspiracy theories that may be prevailing. And I would ask Israel Bella to share the context that may add value to your question. Israel, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Watts. The piece that I first wanted to share, that this grant, it is my understanding, it is not awarded to Kent Youth and Family Services. This is to the Kent School District, is my understanding first.
Mm-hmm.
However, to answer the specific question, what are those steps that we take? In any case, regardless of who the staff would be, I know that in Kent Youth and Family Services, on their board, a conflict of interest agreement is filled out every year.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's one step. The other step that's taken, and I'm sure my colleagues, whichever group or any conflict of interest that might arise, would do the same in their nonprofits, but also making sure that they excuse themselves from any voting that would take, and I do that, and so did Ms. Pop prior to her retirement. So those are just a couple steps that are taken, and I wanted just to share that.
Great.
You're welcome.
I have just a quick question on how the, what is our role and how do we oversight this program to see if we're getting good results? I mean, is it like with city grants that I've been involved in that you have to have a reporting cycle and site visits, or can you educate me on that?
Yes, thank you. President Hamada of Board of Directors. So really the implementation of the program is our staff. We are the ones that are partnering with our local and internal within Kent preschool and pre-K services to actually provide the professional development to kind of begin to put scaffolds in place for students as they transition into kindergarten in our Kent schools. So I'm going to let Marcy Burrell, who is our coordinator for math and who is has a key role in implementing and facilitating this work with our partners.
Thank you, President Hamada and directors and Dr. Watts. Good evening. I'm excited to be able to be part of this program. It's one of the biggest pieces of my heart to see some real genuine math work take root in our community. So I just wanted to start with that. It's something that I have a deep passion about and know that it's at the heart of helping our kids learn math in a new light, to see it as something that's a part of everything around them as opposed to words on a page or numbers on a page. So with that light, we are trying to grow that. So the larger amount, as well as the incorporation of multiple stakeholders in our community, is critical to the work. The goals of the grant regionally are one of the critical goals is about increasing community voice and community connections. So to do that, it is really critical that we partner with KYFS and other partners in our area, and that they are not subservient to our system, that we are equal playing ground in terms of what we do to grow and serve our kids, our students. We share them as our students in Kent, regardless of their age. So that partnership is ingrained in the work. I do want to make sure that it's clear that within the the scope of the work, we do propose for separate funds. So the funds awarded to KSD is for the portions that feed the programming that meets our staff and our students directly, and KYFS receives a separate portion of funds. Certainly there are times when things are shared, but it's not, they're not separate. It's just part of the integrated program sessions that we'll share together around development, around math modeling, using cultural and community funds of knowledge. Those things will be shared because we'll be present together, but the payment of things is separated as much as can be. I do know that the change in the amount has a lot to do with our scope and ability to continue the service from what it originally was in the startup of the grant. And there was a time when KYFS was taking a huge portion of the lead, and we were learners by their side. And so that was a bit of the difference in funds. And whereas in the past we did have a position funded, and it was done through the PSESD. And so those funds didn't roll through us, but did support our community in making those connections. And so now we're looking to grow. We want this to reach and do some vertical progressions into first and second grade at the feeder, through the feeder patterns of Kent Elementary and Neely O'Brien.
And to be clear, these are grant funds that we're receiving from Gates, right? Yeah.
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 I just wanted, sorry.
No, no.
Hi, Marcy. It's
Hi.
Good to see you.
Good to see you. Yeah.
So I was actually involved with this program with Marcy through Kent Youth and Family last year, and the year before I was the Kent Youth and Family parent representative. And I am so happy and I am so excited that that this is growing. You know, I personally, as a community member, have learned so much, and I am so glad to see that, you know, equity in school and math and learning is such an important and subject that is dear to our hearts here at Kent School District. And you know, so much hard work has been done at these meetings, not just Kent School District, but all the school districts involved. And you know, we've had parents come from other school districts, from different cultures, to talk to us about what they want to see. So I know that there's definitely parent voice involved, and other parents also from other school districts besides myself. But you know, it's been a wonderful experience, and I wish I could go back this year, but I know that I can't. I'm gonna miss everybody, but you know, I'm really, really happy and excited to see that this program gets to grow. So that's what I wanted to say. Thank you.
And I just want to comment that I'm having some difficulty, with all due respect to Director Bettinger, to seeing the conflict of interest part, because I feel like we've had multiple grant funding opportunities, and thinking specifically of Best Starts for Kids, you know, where we have Centro Rendu, and where we have CNC, and all of these groups come together and are funded to provide services in our school district. And KYFS has been doing this for I don't know how long, since way before, you know, 3 superintendents. So yeah, I'm a little bit perplexed.
It's, again, in an oversight role, I'm just trying to understand how we deal with, you know, how, if that's a concern at all, or if, you know, how we deal with any potential even appearance of impropriety. I mean, that's forefront sometimes with organizations, and I didn't know how it works in a school district. I know how it works in a corporate environment, but I don't know how it works in a school district. And you know, I'm just, you know, our role is oversight and understanding. And so I would be remiss if I didn't, you know, ask the question so I could understand how it works in a school district to avoid even the appearance of impropriety.
I can jump in here really quickly. I just sent a primer from WASDA about conflicts of interest for board directors, superintendents, and other staff. They have really good guidance in regards to conflicts of interest. This is well-charted territory for us in the sense that we're really looking at is when there's a financial stake, and somehow the director or someone would benefit from it financially. That is the most common example that would require interest checks. So in this case, it looks like we're avoiding that, but we could certainly provide some legal training and support from WASDA to the board related to this and distribute the materials that I just gave to the superintendent and Mr. Reynolds.
That would be great. That would be very helpful. So, because this is new territory for me. So,
No, I
thank
appreciate
you.
that. Thank you, Curtis. And I would add, thank you, Director Vengadaslam, for your additional comments. I would also add a United Way of King County as another provider. They also support iGrad and have done so in a mighty way. And what Chief Vela mentioned is it's a common approach to make sure that there is a signature line that when there is voting to approve any sort of resources, whether it's financial or otherwise, that the individual who is involved in the receiving organization would recuse herself or himself from that. And that's very common. At the same time, we cannot do this work without the support of our community-based partners and organizations. In previous agenda items, even more specialized organizations that support the specific needs of children whose needs may not be met in the way in which we intend without those organizations. So what this tells me also is that I need to, and we need to do a better job of informing on the front end and providing you with the context that you need, not to ensure that a decision is made, but one to make sure that you have all the information and context to make as an informed recommendation to support our children and the adults who serve them in the best way that we can in the most equitable manner. Thank you.
And I just have a quick comment that, you know, having looked at ACAP and ECAP and all these wonderful programs that they have out for these little ones and the huge difference it can make, and actually going into the places where they are at, you know, it sounds like you're going right into those school areas and that could use some of those services particularly. I think it's great. I mean, I'd like to come and visit because I love being with the little ones at ACAP and ECAP. And I mean, I went in the beginning when they were just new, and then they had us back at the end of the year, and it was unbelievable growth. And I'm sure I'd like to see that in these kids too. So thank you for all you're doing. Okay, is there any other discussion? Seeing none, okay, so we have on the floor, are we voting on this tonight?
Yep.
Okay, I want to get back in my rhythm here. All right, 3.3 has been moved and seconded, the roadmap region early learning math grant. All those in favor of supporting this, signify by raising your right hand and saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed signify by raising your right hand and saying nay. The motion carries. Okay, so let's see. We're about at the end here. We are at the end here. Okay, I believe we are adjourned unless there's anything else at 8:09. All right, thank you all for being here.
Thank you. Bye.
Good night.
Good night. Hello, Sarah. Hello, Sarah.